Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on advanced metaverse investigations. We have our world famous speaker, Dr. Musa, Professor David Smith, Mr. Jason, Professor Rob, Mr. Eric, and Mr. Duani. First, I would like to give chance Dr. Musa.
Yeah, thank you for giving a chance to talk on this, new technology trend, Metaverse. I think this technology, will play, a vital role, in all the world. But it will take, sometimes maybe 10, 15 years, to, billions, of people can access, due to, activation of the platform, the activation of the new technology, cloud of everything that depend on 5G, 6G technology, Internet of Things, digital twin, tactile internet, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, extended reality. So I think we can imagine this virtual world where billion of people can live, work, shop, learn, and interact with each other. So this physical world in the world, the computer screen we use today to connect to the World Wide Web of information have become, a portal, to 3D. So we will transform from 2D to 3D, like real life. So it will be, bigger and better, digital, or facsimile or avatar or something like that. So so this technology, if we activate this technology in the next 10 years or 15 years, uh, so we'll get a lot of advantages. For example, learning, learning with virtual, reality experience enabled by metaverse will, become a lot of advantage, in speeding up the observation of new concept. Also, work, the ability to interact, people try to use other, people can interact with technology, through a metaverse. Also, human relationship, so immersion, existing human relationship, becomes, more strong. Also, for a government, improve access to government service and information with this, metaverse. Uh, so a lot of things, related to what people have to say, that people can use their imagination without limit with this new technology, help humanity to move away from spending most of their time, doing, work, allowing more than enjoyable creativity and activity. Also, people use of metaverse, in a way that avoid wear and tear on the real world. The metaverse, could operate with few negative effects, So this new effect, for example, also a lot, for advantage, for example, enabled, faster learning, assessing operation, a lot of advantage of this new technology. At the same time, we care about security and challenge that we got from the metaverse challenge and the privacy concern. So the current lack of privacy regulation for the metaverse present many risks for the business and user. For example, misapplication and applicability of current privacy regulators such as GDPR. Also, issue concerning data rights and ownership, explanation of minor user-to-user privacy. So a lot of things, and at the same time, I'm care about to reduce the gap between African countries and Europe and USA in case of activity, this new technology, because also it needs finance, because maybe you pay like for headset or something like that for $200 and pay monthly like $10 or $20. So it needs a lot for finance, also the how know-how technology. So all the what it matters, we don't want to increase the gap between the developing country and the developed country. So we are looking for the universal adoption of the cloud of everything technology, metaverse technology in all the world, not only in developing country, but all developing country and developed country. Thank you so much for give me a chance to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. We are discussing on advancing in metaverse investigation. So, if you add some important informations based on research and innovation, that will be helpful for our audience.
Sharif, thank you. The whole area of the metaverse, as we know, is one that is still dramatically expanding and putting places in it. But the metaverse has really attracted the attention of not only commercial practitioners and things, but really academicians as well. Because if you just go and look, for example, on Google Scholar, the number of research papers and things affected in the metaverse and how those future innovations are being investigated is just skyrocketing. Because, companies in the industry are eager to explore ways to capitalize on the metaverse to create these experiences. We're seeing large companies beginning to get in there. But we've got to go ahead and begin to go and do things that let us understand what started today and going to where we're going in the future is just dramatically different. So part of the investigation, though, is you do the identification, you then do the screening, and you look at the eligibility, and the investigations are just going tremendously in this one. We're seeing more and more 3D in it. We're seeing the different elements of how to build them. But the technology life cycle of the metaverse is very interesting right now. And it's really a very disruptive technology adoption life cycle. And trying to begin to put the places in place there. You see, for example, Adobe bringing up big differences into the type of investigations there. But it's really moving very rapidly, and academics is trying to catch up with the science in the commercial sector that's pushing this forward. So, Shrees, those are some initial remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Jason.
Oh, sorry. I was just waving at Extra and Brian as they joined. I wasn't putting my hand up, but I'm willing to take a turn. And I'll just go quick because there are a lot of panelists. But my first thought is about jurisdiction and the complexity between jurisdictions at national and subnational levels. And also that this is supranational. And that so the network effect for that should be mindful of outpacing the rest in terms of like processing power to render 3D and all of that, in that like establishing connectivity at like the baseline is the accomplishment in the network effect to maximize. And that like, yeah, I know the exponent will let us get there. And that they're sort of going to leapfrog. They're going to go straight into the internet that already is 3D and has fast processing. And so standard setting in a supranational way is sort of like the meta challenge. And I'll leave it at that. That was my first comment for now.
Thank you. Professor Rob.
Well, there are two metaverse instances that I'm watching right now fairly closely. On the consumer side is Facebook's Horizons, and on the commercial side is NVIDIA's Omniverse. Horizons has been a disaster. Even Facebook employees won't use it. And I think the underlying problem with regard to the approach is typically when you're doing something like this, the cost of the front end is fairly high, and that means it has an audience on the commercial, can develop an audience on the commercial side which is willing to spend that extra cost for simulation, and that's really where the metaverse has made its initial forays. Whether we're talking immersive gaming, like wargaming, to full-on building and city simulations, and Earth 2 being a worldwide simulation. That's where the metaverse is playing reasonably well. Moving on from the initial instances to creating digital twins, initially of buildings, then eventually of people. But that's all commercial, and the reason why is because the money's there to develop the instance, and it provides a monetary benefit. If you create a virtual twin of a building before you build it, you can take your clients through the building. You can resolve things that otherwise would have had to been covered with expensive change orders, and then the client gets a better result at a lower price, and the contractor isn't struggling to meet a set of customer needs that may be ill-defined and poorly communicated. So the metaverse instances on the commercial side are pretty robust, and some of the military work, which has been going on even before we called it the metaverse, has been pretty stunning as well. Tank commander training, aircraft pilot training, and certainly commercial pilots have been training in a virtualized environment for decades, long before we even coined the term metaverse. The hope, of course, of the metaverse is that it'll be some kind of interconnected whole, kind of a replacement for the web, and it's been held up as Web 3.0 a number of times. But that's not the way we are right now. Right now, it's whether we're talking about Horizons or we're talking about Omniverse, the instances are fairly contained. They're secured from each other. You're not going to be moving seamlessly from Horizons to an Omniverse instance, because the Omniverse instances tend to be tied to commercial activity. For instance, one of the bigger Omniverse instances is being used to train autonomous cars at the moment. But you and I can't go in there because they don't want anybody mucking around with the simulation and creating problems. So even though the hope is, or I shouldn't say the hope, the belief is at some point we'll have some kind of internet-like universal metaverse. It's very much like was depicted in the book Snow Crash, which has been held up several times as kind of the standard we're moving towards. The fact is we're really not very close to that at all. We're developing standards, but right now the standards have less to do with interoperability between instances and more to do with being able to create 3D objects and then move those objects between instances. So you only have to create a virtual twin of a dresser one time, and then somebody else licenses that instance, and then they can create that in their licenses that image, and then they recreate that in their version of the metaverse with all its 3D stuff intact. Now, on the commercial side, we've gone quite a bit farther than on the consumer side. I wouldn't use Horizons as where the metaverse technology is. That was a low cost, a very cost constrained effort to create an underlying social construct by somebody that has no social skills. And I think that's probably the underlying problem with Horizons, is it's put forward as a way that people can meet and interact, but the guy that's driving it is not a person that likes to meet and interact. I mean, I give you a personal instance. I was at a meet and greet for Facebook a few years back, and the one thing Zuckerberg didn't do was meet and greet. Isolated all the way in, isolated all the way out. He just isn't a social guy, and I can understand that. I'm an introvert myself, so the idea of interacting is problematic. But that means that I probably shouldn't be an architect of a metaverse for social interaction, because I'm not going to have the core skill set. And the core skill set is coming up with a way that people can interact in the metaverse, much like they would in real life. And we're really not there yet. I mean, we very, very clearly have to get much closer to photorealism in terms of the personal avatars, so they don't look a little freaky like floating ghosts or legless humans, which I find personally very disconcerting. There are social instances of this where people are working, where they're able to work collaboratively, but it's kind of a kludge still. It's still not like working in person. And we still have to deal with the fact that when we're in the metaverse, we need a prosthetic. That prosthetic is a headset of some type that allows us to enter the metaverse. And by and large, our race has really been against prosthetics. Unless we're crippled and we have to use them to get around. And so getting over that's going to be problematic. Remember 3D TV, people wouldn't wear the glasses. Those were far lighter, far cheaper, far more available than high quality VR headsets. And the really good VR headsets, like the ones Varjo makes, are still in about $3,500 range, which is pretty expensive for a consumer. But very acceptable to a commercial instance where you're either using it for training military or commercial or otherwise, or using it to view a construct, an architectural construct, then you can justify the cost. We have had a couple attempts to drop this into automotive, and there is a connection between the metaverse and VR experiences and autonomous cars beyond just training the cars. And one of them is entertainment. Audi just started talking about this idea of using VR headsets in cars and having the VR experience synchronized with the automotive driving experience. And so while you're driving, when the car turns, that you're turning in the VR experience, because one of the big problems with any VR experience is motion sickness. And if you're going to use it in an automobile and the car is turning but the image is not turning, you're going to get motion sick. I mean, there may be a handful of people that don't, but most of us get motion sick. And so using it as in-car entertainment becomes kind of interesting, because you could be driving downtown Detroit, which isn't exactly a great view, but you're using the Metaverse headset. Or the other way, Jaguar was exploring this, and so was Mercedes, turning the screens and the windows in the car to screens and being able to look out the windows and see that virtual landscape. So you might be driving through Detroit where the real world looks kind of crappy, but you're looking out into the world of Token, or the world of Burroughs, or whatever science fiction or fantasy artists that you want, and you're experiencing that world through their eyes. And you could have things like, battles between cars, and you could do some really interesting things that they're talking about. We're not really quite there yet. But the idea is to really step into simulations that are either tied to the physics of this world or tied to physics of your imagination. And coupling those together, I think it's going to be kind of problematic. This idea of being able to move seamlessly between instances. I mean, imagine if you're operating in an instance where the rules are similar to our world. It's a Earth 2 simulation where it's fully simulating the planet. So gravity works the way it's supposed to, and everything else. And then you suddenly walk into another instance where none of those rules apply. Now you can fly, you've got superpowers or whatever it is. It could be pretty disconcerting to move seamlessly between them. And plus, there's going to be a paywall element, because folks are going to get paid for the experience they're providing. So much like if you were to walk into a club that's got entertainment, you've got to pay a cover charge. Somebody's got to pay for those instances, and so you might have an overarching ability to walk through that's pretty generic, that's provided by the government, and then you're walking into other instances that are a fee. Depending on what it is they are, you can do very different things. Those all have to be worked out. And making it so the disconcerting part doesn't get so annoying that you don't use it becomes problematic. And look out of control things like Twitter and Facebook have on and off become. There's a whole level of rule enforcement that would probably have to play in here. I mean, if we look at metaverse-like games, we've had griefers for a long period of time, people that just go around destroying the game for others, and we're going to have that in the metaverse as well. And so finding a way to mitigate that is going to be something we're still going to have to deal with. We're talking about metaverse investigations, which is kind of an interesting term, one that I haven't seen coined of late, but there certainly is a potential. Once we create digital twins and we hard tie them to their physical constructs, which is the plan, so that the digital twins remain synchronized with their real world counterparts, that if there was a crime committed, you would have a digital record where you'd be able to go back and explore the crime as it occurred, because all those sensors that are keeping those digital twins synchronized are watching the environment. And so you can imagine, certainly I can imagine science fiction stories that address the criminal element of this or the research of it. And there have been movies that have surrounded. I remember a Demi Moore vehicle a while back where they were talking with long before the metaverse, where she was wandering through this virtual reality experience and attempting to take over a company, and it was very data centric. And Bruce Willis was the protagonist that was trying to stop her. She was the villain. But his interface was not the metaverse interface. His was a 2D interface, and he was able to move much more quickly using a more web-like interface than she was with the metaverse interface. And I think that's one of the problems we're kind of ignoring here, is the fact that if we're rendering everything, it's going to slow down the overall experience. So right now you go on the web, you put in a search query, you bring up a web page, you click on the link, and you get to the information you want. Well, in the metaverse, at least right now, go to a library construct, you'd open a directory construct, you go to a shelf of research, that all takes time. And yes, it would look glorious. It would look like you're in a library walking down a street, and you'd be able to move between buildings at machine speed, so speed limits wouldn't apply. But still, I don't see any way it's not going to be slower than it would be if you just had the regular digital interface. And so for a lot of things, we may not leave the web interface that we have because it's just simply quicker. You want to get access to information quickly. The web interface isn't bad and it's largely optimized. And the vector on that may be more along the lines of conversational AI, where it will help you make the correct query and get you to the information you want even more quickly, without having to actually, put hands on keyboard or pen to pad, and get you that information because it better understands what it is you want. It can better anticipate your needs once it learns what those needs are. That seems to me to be a better pathway to a lot of what we do right now, where the metaverse is simply relegated to those things that we want to explore, those things we want to simulate, and for things like maintaining large structures, and for doing forensic kinds of work, either looking at why a building failure occurred in the digital world as opposed to having to construct it in the physical world, or recreating a crime scene. I can certainly see very rapidly, they did that on a crime show a couple of years back, where they would recreate the crime scene in a virtual world and then try to solve the crime through that virtual interface. And that I could certainly see happening as we advance the technology. And to a certain extent, we could do a lot of that today with large 3D scanners, where you could scan the environment once the crime had committed, and then somebody compromised the crime scene. You would still have a 3D record that you could explore of that crime scene. And if you look at how HoloLens was created with Lawrence Livermore Labs, that was how it was focused initially. It was focused on exploring Mars. It used the images that were created by the Mars rover, and it allowed scientists to walk Mars virtually, explore, look at things from all angles that had been 3D scanned by the rover, and experience Mars, not quite as if you were there, because we're talking about HoloLens, which is an AR technology, not a VR technology, but allowed them to explore Mars without actually having to go there, which honestly makes a ton more sense than putting up a bunch of people on a rocket ship and sending them to a planet that has very little water, very little air, no food, and no easy way to provide relief should there be a problem that occurs on the planet. In the virtual world, the problems won't kill you. Though, if you've been watching, there has been one virtual world creator that's created a headset that will kill you if you die in game, which I think is probably taking realism just a tad too far. But it was an interesting thought experiment. I'm not rushing out to buy that headset for Christmas, and hopefully none of you will. So those are my opening remarks. The metaverse right now is kind of a mess, I guess is what I'm saying. Commercial side is getting cooked, but very focused around the NVIDIA platform and platforms like it at the moment. The consumer side around Facebook Horizons is an absolute mess. It's sinking Facebook, and I don't see those dynamics changing very rapidly in the next few years.
Mr. Eric.
I'm going to piggyback on what Rob and Jason said, starting with the technology. The metaverse is a mess, just like the internet and the mobile network was a mess and cloud was a mess. And it first starts with people investing various technologies that are going to make up this infrastructure. Everything from 3D and the quantum computing, things to process, things to run, things to connect, things to wear. All that's happening, as we speak at a pretty rapid pace. And in fact, the technology that's out there now is already outpacing our ability to do a lot of the things we talked about, which is an integrated operator. We could create standards that I know David is a fan of. And we could do a lot of that. We just aren't, because that problem is the people part. And of course, the infrastructure is not there to do what we envision the metaverse to be. But we could actually move it a lot further today than we could. But that's not how things work. Things work by people investigating all these technologies that are going to make it so we can keep a sustainable identities as we move from place to place, I don't need to create, an avatar for Horizons and another avatar for Alien Worlds and another avatar. Theoretically, I should be able to have a sustainable identity or identities as I move around. That's part of the infrastructure. I should be able to pay. So that whole payment infrastructure, a lot of work been going on to that. There's the VR, AR, XR infrastructures. There's the computing backbone and the cloud backbone to create those, everything from chips and processors and algorithms, especially bots and things like that. So all that's happening. Then we get to where Rob started to talk about where some people are interested in, yeah, these are nice technologies, but I need to turn this into a business case. And those business cases, a lot of investigation is going, how do we save money? How do we save time, especially in training time? How do we know things? And by the way, in the military exercises, we used to use 3D for what ifs and understanding. But when we operated, we very rarely used 3D. But when you had that, looked at the 2D, you had a 3D understanding. You could match between the two. So 3D was very useful for simulation training and reconstruction. Wasn't very useful for power. But on the other hand, once 3D gets good enough for what you're doing, then it doesn't matter if 2D could be faster. There's this point where things become good enough, even if it isn't the best. So we've got the people that are creating technologies, people that are moving using those technologies for a specific business case. But I think what Jason said is, to me, the big investigations are the people part of it. Right now, people are trying to figure out, what is a community? What can you do? What do businesses look like? And, I'll give you an example of that. We were busy creating a center for governance on an Alien Worlds game planet. So, boy, what did that take? Well, it took somebody to put up the idea. Hey, that might be a good idea. People jumped on that, said, how about this? How about that? People start creating tools. We interview people. So now we're probably 3 weeks into the project, and we're already talking about, here's the website. We're talking about a World Talent Economy Forum office right in there, and it can start out as a 2D space. We're looking at virtual environments. And I've seen people put together businesses and things faster than you've ever seen before, and it includes people from developing countries. It includes people that just barely have enough money for a computer, and all of a sudden they're in there and doing things. And we've got bots, of course, pop in. The key is, so many things are happening, and the speed that it's happening for those things that you can is more than anyone ever thought. And then we're creating these whole organizations and investigating those. Like if you read the book, The Network State, it talks about, how people are going to their networks before they're going to the governments, and in some cases before their religion. So, it's the network you hang out, and some of these networks are creating cities for real. They're buying land. They're doing things. So I think that's the biggest investigation right now, is how do people operate in this world, and how do you do business together? How do you meet people? How do you connect? How do you do things? But it's the fastest environment I've ever seen in my life. It's amazing how fast somebody will come up with something, get it done. And of course, the bots, it's the most amazing to me is how fast bots will appear in hours. Someone will create something, the next hour, there's a ton of bots trying to exploit that or pervert it, or use it, trying to do good things. If it's bot friendly kind of environment, that's the biggest thing, is how many people out there are willing to code and implement a bot. But it's not just that, it's all the applications and connections. And of course, then the other thing Jason alluded to is, well, then there's the governments trying to figure out that, how do we regulate something that's moving so fast we don't understand. So I think the biggest investigations are right now people trying to figure out what this means, how do you play, and how do you use, and how to regulate it.
Thank you. Mr. Brian, that World Talent Economy Forum solving different industrial problem. in emerging economies. So how this metaverse can be helpful for construction industry?
For the construction industry.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first I need to know what you think my expertise in the construction industry is.
No, basically we are just thinking that your expertise in metaverse, and our industry want to move the digitalizations and the digital marketing and this kind of concept. We do not want your expert opinion for construction industry.
Okay.
Better, we want your metaverse expertise for digitalization of construction industry.
Well, where I've actually seen some applications being put together is more in the VR and the AR space. Now, I typically play in token economies and in development, but I have run into some really interesting ones. One of them was they took basically 3D images of internal industrial manufacturing plants, and they were able to actually piece together CAD drawings working with the internal physics of that plant to see if these prototypes would actually work. They could bring in experts from all around the world. They could all put on their headset, and they could actually see the difference that this thing made in the operations, because it was taking the actual data from the operations in the real plant and digitally projecting them into this 3D model. They could test prototypes out, and if you have enough computing power and enough cameras to capture a facility like that, it's quite an application. So I see in the construction industry, we already see VR models coming out for real estate. We already see renderings and drawings that look real, of which we can walk through a browser. So these really are already part of the metaverse, and it's going to be younger, more agile companies, ones who like to take the leap forward in terms of marketing and user experience that are really going to use these. But you're going to know exactly what everything's going to look like. People already do. So as for the future, I really just see more of that evolution. That's already been around for 10 years. And now with the advent of LiDAR and the accessible 3D cameras to everybody, it's just repeating virtual worlds so that it can be cheaper to test, prototype, and run operations, and try out AI, try out what will and won't work. Plant managers should have a bunch of new tools, but it's not going to be anything surprising. It will be incredibly useful and efficient. I already see it. I don't know if y'all have seen renderings. I don't know if anybody here has bought a house and a real estate agent has shown them the virtual tour from across the country. All those are metaverse plays. It's already here. So yeah, it's just going to become more useful. I don't know any great leaps that it's going to take from here. I've already walked around in a factory in the VR headset. So as far as the future, I would say it's here.
Thank you. Mr. Extra.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to dovetail on kind of what Rob was talking about and Eric, right? Because I think they're getting at kind of a similar theme, I guess, from my perspective, which is a matter of efficiency, right? And so, being able to walk through those and I'm not in the construction business, and I don't have any expertise there. But like I was saying, I think the kind of the trope that they're both referring to in a way is about efficiency, right? Is if you can allow people to better understand what the end game is as early as possible, then there's some financial advantage to that to a degree. Or business use case, maybe the better way of putting it. So if that is the advantage of the metaverse at the moment, or at least certainly what Rob and Eric were describing in their specific examples, then there is value there. I think to Brian's point, that somewhat already exists. And so if that's already available through VR and you know, other technologies, then where does the layer of metaverse add value to that? And having legless avatars doesn't really seem to be adding a whole lot of value to that necessarily. Now, if you can add an additional advantage or additional value, maybe is a better way of putting it, where the metaverse does add to that, then you're getting into like more added value and so forth. But I guess in these examples that have been used so far, I don't necessarily see where that added value is coming from in order to justify the cost, whether it be a commercial or a consumer value or use case, maybe a better way of putting it. So anyway, just I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Douani. Philippe.
For an investigation into the metaverse, my experience is quite focused on the metaverse I spend the most time in. And they recently, I guess the experiments in the metaverse seem to be having success, but it's based on a blockchain and it's based on decentralization. So what Eric was referencing is the fast iterations and integrations of communities really being able to investigate and pool data and look at history of actions that have been happening on this metaverse. The success there has been because the game or the metaverse in this instance is Alien Worlds, and they're following a decentralization path where they're just gave kind of the scaffolding of the metaverse, you know, some strength, and are giving the rest to the community. So that one experiment in metaverse development seems to be, well, it's reinvigorated the community. We've seen that because this centralized organization was very risk adverse, especially when the laws are not defined on digital assets and legalities around the world. All of a sudden, dealing with a huge, massive, centralized team to develop a GameFi metaverse, the community is never satisfied at the pace of new tools or new game paths. So one way to solve that is give the game to the players and give it to a governance structure. And the most useful tools that I've seen the community build were all based around investigation. Starting at the governance layer, where now community members are elected into a position where they can vote on proposals and flow funds out to projects to build new games or paths or experiences in this metaverse. The first thing was to have an experience to be able to see all that information. So instead of going through the official user interface or the normal path that the game is made, all of a sudden the community made a lot different new paths that had more information that we could have an easier time understanding where to flow money and what the projects were that wanted to build on top of this metaverse. So this has been relatively new within the last few weeks. The game is launched 2 years ago, and it's just finally decentralized and given that part to the community. But it's been a success so far in seeing the fast iterations of new developments on top of this open source metaverse. So, so that maybe doesn't speak to the metaverse. You know, we have all these different use cases for metaverse, from corporate to factories to military. This being more of a community-led experiment. Just seeing the advantages of having it decentralized has really the pace of development of investigating has been incredible. And in the blockchain space, it's quite quick to post or write something to a blockchain, but the amount of actions of millions of players interacting with different tokens and digital items in this game, it is a challenge to keep up and do the investigation of that on-chain analysis. And the goal here is the network effect, like Jason was speaking about, to collaborate and bring in different communities. So some of the communities are artist communities that have a lot of IP and have a lot of art or digital art, and they're seeing this as a way to collaborate and incentivize people for their in-game actions and a way to cross-market. But all of that needs, some investigation, a way to find, what leaderboard is important to that community, what actions are important. And then, all the steps from getting that from, all these different communities, whether it's the developer community, the player community, the artist community, the governance. So, the key right now in that metaverse is all about that investigation and finding what data and what touch points and what passive gameplay are important to each one of those groups, and be able to present that very simply. And I think the biggest challenge is just that statement, simply having all this complex data being able to be presented to capture my attention cleanly and quickly, so I can make intelligent decisions, and understanding and pulling out the information from each one of these communities of what is important to present that cleanly. Because the base of that game, when someone's interacting with it, we feel it's very simple. The base of the game is one button click, very simple action. But onboarding a new user, there's so many different stats and different things to catch your attention, it becomes overwhelming. So, the investigation seems to be, that's going to be the new focus of pushing that to the people that want that information in a clean, simple format. Is going to be really important, because we're trying to capture people's attention, and there's the amount of data and the amount of on-chain actions are incredible. So that would be my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Musa, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think for the metaverse, it depends on the cloud of everything technology. For example, 7 technology, for example, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, extended reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, brain computer interface, 3D modeling and reconstruction, edge computing, cloud computing, blockchain. So that's why we have to to know the benefit of this technology that will help a lot in each sector. For example, aviation. For example, in a flight, in aviation, the captain, first look in the manual, to know information about the flight, and then tablet. But with Google Glass, it can let the captain more attention to the flight, because it doesn't use that. So that's why we need, if we wanted to value this metaverse network, like any network before, like telephone landline network, telephone wireless, mobile internet, or something like that. If we increase the number of users, we will increase the value of this metaverse. So we need to increase the number of users instead of like 1,000 or million to billion, something like that. That's the target. If we increase the number of users that access this metaverse, it will increase the value of the network. It will decrease the price. Instead of you pay like $20 a month, you pay less, and instead of you pay like 200 in a Google Glass or headset or gloves or something like that, you will pay less because the number is increase. That's why we have to investigate how to go to the user, to the government, to society. What is the benefit of this metaverse, like the benefit of cloud everything, technology, artificial intelligence? How can we get benefit from this metaverse? What's the benefit to transform from 2D to 3D? And also we will use the power of like, for example, tactile internet, using Internet of Things, 5G, 6G. It will like zero distance. So a lot of we have to concentrate how to get attacked. I know that a lot of companies like Microsoft, Facebook, and Nike invest billions of dollars in this new technology, but we have go in parallel to concentrate about how to convince the users that will change from social media like Facebook, WhatsApp, or from Skype or any video conference meeting to metaverse. What is the benefit from using 3D instead of 2D? It's easy to use. We can like work and play at the same time. That's why you have to concentrate to increase the number of users that access this metaverse, to to get value to this metaverse network, and to decrease the price, and it will add more to the user, to the society, to all. And at the same time, we have to concentrate for cooperation, with cooperation countries with each other, governments with each other. Like we said, in climate change crisis and COVID-19, without cooperation, we cannot do anything, because of there's something related to privacy, it's something related to who owns the data, who owns this metaverse. So a lot of things we have to study the policy and construction and investigate about it before to go. I think it will take maybe 10 years, 15 years to go a little billion user access it. It takes time, so we have time to investigate about all these parameters. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much. My pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks?
I love the remarks from everyone, because we've had a good diversity of discussion around this topic. I think as we look at the metaverse, and particularly as the topic is the advances and the investigations in it, it's clear to me from looking at the scholarly literature that there are many different threads that, as we look at this, I can take and look in the scholarly research and see that there's threads in education, there's threads in training, there's threads in governance. In governance, I really mean government organization type of governance, as opposed to software governance and things. There's threads in entertainment. And in fact, the most recent big thread in metaverse, in the scholar thing, is the metaverse as an alternative to conferences and meetings. A lot of research being done in that area right now. But I can keep on going, but there is in the scholarly research over 100 different broad topical areas where this research is taking place, which tells me the impact of the metaverse, once it begins to be established, is what was just said, is users begin to adapt to it outside of the places where they're being told they have to use it, like in training, at their jobs and stuff like that. The impact's going to be massive. And it's going to be one that your students in your institutions, Sharif, your government agencies working with you and others, the entrepreneurs we're seeing on the ground in Bangladesh and the rest of the area over there really need to stay up to date on, really need to understand well. Part of my recommendation to them is at least to start some pilot programs and begin to use those pilot programs to learn it even better. And then actually in the areas of their focus, because there's so much scholarly research being done now and corporate research being done, is pick a few of those and follow them, because the updates are coming out fast and furious right now. And it's an area that's going to be very important as we go from our traditional internet today, which I love how Eric said it's still in a state of chaos, because it really is, into an area of even more chaos as we look at the emerging metaverse too. So Sharif, that's my concluding remarks. And Sharif looks frozen, so I guess it's to you, Jason.
Is that the case? I thought he was just listening.
No, he looks frozen.
Okay, then. Well, again, wonderful thoughts to share. Some of it very exciting, some of it very concerning. It's like, this is just it, the pendulum of we're building a better world, and it's risky, and it's risky, and it's risky, and we're navigating that. We're working through it. I've read Snow Crash. It's pretty grim sort of depiction of a feudalist sort of fallout in a high-tech way. It is riveting. I highly recommend it as an entertainment piece, as a science fiction piece. It's very true to science fiction. It's properly scientific. And yeah, there was sort of good example as well. Like Interpol is training people already using simulations. It's a news item that is just sort of fresh. And it makes a world of sense. There's such a need. There is real cybercrime. Like, you think bad things can't happen in the world of cybercrime. They do, and we should probably prevent them. We should probably have training out there to prevent them. We should probably have standards to prevent them, to know what to look for so that they are prevented. Like, consumer awareness is not there. To Brian's point, hey man, I can make a pretty good list of things that exist that are not widely distributed. Hovercrafts, right? Not in widespread use, like on civilian roads. Like it's there are where to start with the list of things that exist that are not in common use. Yeah, these things exist, but blueprints in the construction industry, when you bid a tender, you give a price to an infrastructure project, the amount of blueprint work and sort of redlining the blueprint is immense. And to find a secondary use case for that body of work, to have like a digital twin that has an afterlife, a useful life after the completion of construction, I think that is an economic angle to explore. That any artifact of a thing that gets built that has blueprints, that goes through the process of quality control, that gets modified with its red lines, with as built, that could be digital. I think that even the meetings that people do for those, I do have some experience in the construction industry, and that although it exists, I'm sure, I'm also sure it's not conventional. It's not conventional to the trade as we have it, and that's a future for us to look forward to. And as far as investigations, even in the domain of building safety, I appreciate the idea of forecasting building performance. There are a lot of moving parts, right? There are energy dynamics and emissions to consider, and that we're out of time already, so I apologize. You know me, I can rant. I tried to cut it short in my first comment, and I'll do that again and pass it along. Until next time.
Looks like Sharif is frozen
Thank
again.
you, Professor Rob.
Okay, thanks. and you are still at really low frame rates. And probably that's kind of a showcase of one of the issues with regard to the metaverse that we're going to experience is the fact that it requires a fairly big pipe to work it. Because here we are with what is basically a 2D interface video stream, and you can tell the difference between people that have a good internet connection and people that don't have a good internet connection, and the underlying requirement is far less than it is with the metaverse, where you're trying to render an entire world in 3D and make it not only photorealistic, but give it physics, give the items that are in that world the ability to act and interact the way they would in the real world. And so that it's fairly resource intensive, both computing intensive at the endpoint and very computing intensive at the control point at the center office, and then you need a big pipe in between them, which is something we have to work through. But there are a number of other things we have to work through. One is the man-machine interface. Right now, the VR headsets, which is the predominant way that we do it. There is some AR work, of course, as well, but the predominant way for the metaverse is VR, because it becomes, you want the occlusion. You want to be able to experience that virtual world as if you were there. And AR right now does, AR by its very nature does do that. You have ghosting, and so even though HoloLens was kind of the first instance of what was broad use of metaverse types of technology for simulation, that the nature of AR doesn't lend itself to immersion because it's an overlay. It's not a replacement. So when we get into the headset, what we're also talking about the fact we have smell, we have taste, we have touch. All of those things aren't currently worked. We are working on haptic gloves, so it kind of gives the sense that you might be touching something, but you don't get the solidity of the object. So you can see you've touched something, you can squeeze right through it. It doesn't have physical presence. They've got robotic overlays, kind of like prosthetics for your hands, that will give that virtual item its feel, at least with regard to the being able to stop you when you hit the item. But they're very kludgy, and so in the end, the technology really isn't at a point where we can fully experience immersion, which is really part of the promise for the metaverse. And I'm not really expecting us to get there until we get either a better man-machine interface. In other words, that what's been proposed is a direct plug that would connect you physically to and shortcut all your senses and be able to plug you in that way. That would probably be the most immersive way to do it. The issue, of course, then becomes medical. You've got Elon Musk's plan to put a metal grid on your brain to create that interface. The issue is when you put your brain is pretty squishy. And metal is not forgiving. And so picture yourself with that metal construct in your head, and say you were to fall down and that construct was to move, it would just tear right through the brain. And not to mention your brain's growing and changing, shrinking throughout your lifetime. And of course, metal doesn't do any of those things. So you would have a certain amount of tearing and damage throughout the life of the product. I don't think that's sustainable. I think the interface is going to have to be either some type of polymer that can stretch and better work in contact with the brain, or be biological in nature, so it can behave kind of like the brain does. And we are nowhere near that either. So the metaverse, as we're talking about it now, is in its most useful form is in simulation. Dwayne, I'm hoping he's going to come back on and tell me what game he was playing. That has that is a cooperative. The one that I play most often is City of Heroes, which was a game that went off the air about a decade ago, and the developers came back and put it up in stealth, and so you can play the game for free, but it's fully supported by the community. It's the game company and distributor exited the process, and it's just developers working in their free time that keeps that game operating. It is quite a bit of fun. But it's a metaverse-like game. You are immersed. You are in the game, but your interface is not a VR headset. You still have the 2D screen interface as you're going through the world, and while you've got various superpowers, which I like, that the environments are not destructible, so you can throw all kinds of nuclear level weapons at buildings, and they're just going to shrug them off because it's not that kind of an environment. But in the end, right now, the best use of the metaverse is in simulation, either to simulate things that you're anticipating will happen, or things that you know will happen, and part of that, of course, is for training. And now the most latest instance is for remote maintenance, creating highly instrumented digital twins that will identify failures and will allow a remote operator to run a robot remotely, or dictate what needs to happen, and the robot then automatically does the job that needs to be done remotely. And clearly, a technician to be dispatched on site. I use an AR headset with an overlay. See the part that's damaged. The AR headset will walk them through the repair process and then fix it. I was in an Intel plant in Israel a month or so back, and that's how they did maintenance. The technician uses a headset, a mixed reality headset, that walks them through the entire repair with overlays, and it's incredibly handy. You don't really have to train in the repairs. The headset contains the training, and all you do is have to develop the hand-eye skills to work the tools and learn the tools, because it's going to call out tools for you to grab. It'll show you a picture of the tool, which helps, but you'll go a lot faster if you know what tool it's calling out. So in the end, right now, Metaverse is really best for simulation, and the parts we have to still work through is the high bandwidth requirements, which is really part of what broke Facebook's horizons, was the fact they tried to build it for the world we have today, which is the world we will have when the Metaverse matures, and moving on a market that doesn't have the money to fund the kind of experience that it wants. And the commercial instances like NVIDIA Omniverse, which are relatively mature, you can go in and explore. It's a trip if you go over and find the film of their virtual headquarters office. It was built virtually months before they built the building, and I took a tour of the building. All the lighting was accurate, including the sunlight and shadowing. You could take it through a day. You could see how the light was going to affect the people that were working there, and make all the changes you need to make in the building design before that first brick was laid, the foundation was poured, or anything else, and solve a lot of the problems that people often don't get to until after the building's done, and you suddenly realize there are doors opening up in hallways that shouldn't be happening, and a lot of rework that has to occur. So as a simulation environment, commercially, for industry, it is a viable platform now. Gaming, it's certainly viable. We've had gaming in what was metaverse-like instances for a while, but we're still exploring full immersion, and we don't have a good idea how to do that. Some of the books, science fiction books, and we talk about science fiction every once in a while, I've talked about immersion tanks, man-machine digital interfaces, and the rest, which we're working on. But as I mentioned, the Musk stuff, which has had the most coverage, I don't think it's going to work. So in the end, we're getting there. Where it works as simulation, where it doesn't work outside of games, is on the consumer side and social side that's not cooked yet. And just be aware, with any technology, people get overexcited. The majority of people lose money in it because the technology isn't set. So here's an area where, if you're going to invest in this area or develop schools in this area, make sure you're well-founded and you can see where it's working and put your time in where it's actually working, and not in the speculative areas unless you're really wedded to the technology and you're in deep enough to know which speculations have a high possibility or probability of being successful and which don't. Otherwise, like we just saw with cryptocurrency, you're living on a hype curve, and when you're living on a hype curve, you have a great deal of danger of losing a ton of money and a ton of time. Neither of which is easily recovered. Well, money's hard to recover, time's impossible to recover. And so stay cognizant of the fact we're at the early days of this, and much of what we're seeing right now will not survive. I have a feeling Facebook may not survive this. And the smart money is going to go where it's actually working, not where it's not.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Yeah, I view the metaverse slightly differently. I don't view it as a goal of getting everybody all the time in completely virtual immersive spaces doing everything. I think that is a capability, but I remember when we operated Emergency Operations Center. Within the Emergency Operations Center, we had 3D renderings. We actually could project anything on we could take a corner of a building and project it and correct and make it straight. We put things on sand tables and integrated live data as it came in, and we were able to operate that just by touching things that weren't there. I mean, at the time, that was pretty cool technology. As we rolled out, we had people with headsets communicating with repeaters through buildings. We had the ability to them to check in and get 3D and 2D views. And then out to the edge, we had people that were barely able to get and receive very minimal amounts of data due to bandwidth and technology, the fact they're in hostile spaces. But the whole thing is we were all interacting together effectively in a very changing, dynamic environment. And that includes with documents and everything. And that's kind of how I view the metaverse. Some of us will be rich in 3D space and playing and immersive when we need it. When we don't, it'll be kind of like Rob said. Sometimes it makes sense to be fully immersed. Some things are faster, easier, not immersive. And by the way, as we did this and things got more advanced, that more advanced technology kept working its way down that pipeline to the edge. Over time, people got more interactive, more 3D, more ability with QR codes and things to do things. But the key is everybody can play. So when we talk about the World Talent Economy Forum, I would say the number one investigation we need to do is set up a metaversal welcome center and have a business office to help explore and help people decide how they can, what can you do today with what you have. And then as technology rolls down, that's the constant thing, is how do you integrate these new capabilities? Things really take off when things become easily accessible through standards and culture, where people get used to it. Pieces of this metaverse are going to go like hotcakes as they start rolling out, but some of it already is. And by the way, the part that already isn't immersed in VR. And now I'm starting to see the VR and the immersive world starting to roll its way in there. But I think the big holdup, besides computing power, is, like Rob said, the inconvenience and cost of the hardware. But I've seen a lot of VR glasses that are starting to look like that. So once that's there and affordable, I think that will be accessibility will be a big thing. So I guess the way I look at it is we need the heavy investigations for technologies that are going. We need heavy investigations of putting business logic and models into that technology, do real good stuff, really good things. And I think investigations are how people can use what's accessible right there to do things fastly, quickly, effectively, and protect themselves security-wise and bot-wise and all those things. But we can set up a World Talent Economy Forum in the metaverse we could probably do it today. We want to think about it. Within a couple of weeks, we could set up a welcome center right there and teach people about the metaverse and how to do it and have them learn by doing.
I want to welcome all of you to set up this World Talent Economy Forum Center, because we are growing very fast. Maybe it will be helpful for business organization in Asia Pacific. Mr. Brian, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Eric, let me first say I would love to help you set up whatever welcome center we come up with. There's so much energy and intelligence and purpose and potential out of everybody who's throwing their passion, energy, and heart at the metaverse, blockchain, new technology, the avant-garde of where we're going with Web3. Really decentralized human organization and idyllic notions of what we could be. These existential questions are especially relevant now as we see everything that's going on and we can literally feel the heat turning up on our planet. But one of the things that I notice is the people who are in Web3 are in Web3. We're not converting masses. Crypto.com is, I can see right now they're sponsoring FIFA, but that's just kind of monopoly money playing, speculation, unregulated territory. The real question is how we're going to grow the market for the Web3, and the early adopters are here, but it's only once it's obviously useful, profitable and integrated, that people are going to really jump on this thing. When we think about something like international supply chain, once smart contracts are easily replacing underwriters in the banks, once a wallet doesn't have to go through anything besides creation like a bank account, and once people can trust it, we'll start to see those things going on. But until we have a side-by-side comparison of how much this is going to save people, how obvious it is, and it's basically seamlessly integrated into their current business practices, we're not going to get a whole lot of adoption. With that, I think we must experiment. And so, Eric, what you're saying as a welcome center and education and thing is all we can do at a certain point until we start really building. And I see the biggest problem is, the chicken or the egg. There's a few non-distributed centers of a lot of money that are, paying for grants and applications and economic development and things. But, we're a lot of the people here are the same people. We have continuing conversation, and we build, but it's a lot of ideas. Where's the actual useful play of which industry can accept right now? And that's where we're going to see the metaverse constructed. I love the example of Rob gave of the Intel plant not needing the knowledge base, having that accessible and integrated. Holy cow, that is the perfect application. But that's going to be very specialized and very expensive for a little while. As AI and knowledge are built out, I really see that as the next phase of the metaverse. I know companies that are currently putting together, VR simulations for Army training and things like that. But an AR on an open range with, a real weapon that fires blanks or something like that is probably going to be way more useful for actually, reactive training. All that being said, I think we have a ways to go. I think that we have to start experimenting, and we can't expect to make a lot of money at it yet. Maybe in 2 to 5 years. And, maybe some of us are going to get lucky. I know a lot of people in Alien Worlds got really lucky. I just know it's not the majority of Alien Worlds users. I know that there's going to be people who made a lot of money in FTX, but the majority of people are not. And so we do have a centralization of money still, even though this is a decentralized play. So far, how I've seen nature work. So my thought, my idea in all of this is whenever somebody has a project and you want to go, let's go. Eric and I talk probably every other week, and I love what he's doing. A lot of my thought processes in my proof value economy might have plays in it. I'm talking to a few different cities and things like that. There's no grant money there yet, but I want to build. And so I would suggest anybody who has an idea, let's start building it on a spreadsheet. If it's metaverse, if it's tokenomics, if it's anything else, if you want to go and you have the energy, Eric, count me in for this this welcome committee thing, man.
The Center for Governance is on a mind map, so that's that's pretty good.
It's perfect. So and I don't know about all of you. I have a problem just joining in large communities that there's 200 people messaging at once and there's so much energy. I like this one-on-one stuff. And so anybody who I don't have I have a lot of theories and dreams and experiments that I want to participate in, but I don't have this one thing in the world that I have to change right now. So anybody who has that, let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Extra. What's your concluding remarks?
So I have a lot of different thoughts. Brian, to your point, I think I have that idea. And Jason and Dwayne are certainly involved in my singular focus. So I can share with you that idea if you want. Because I know Dwayne and, like I said, Dwayne and Jason are basically, co-signers to a certain extent, co-conspirators. So, we can talk about kind of like why my singular focus is the way it is, and why I think it's a good idea. And maybe Dwayne can speak to that as well. But separate from that, just kind of like to dovetail with the conversation is, Rob, I have to say that yes, brains are squishy things. There's no doubt about that, and that is both good and bad to a certain extent. And there are takeaways from that kind of concept, if you will. So I just want to kind of like dovetail on that for a moment because I found that very funny. But anyway, I think that going to Eric's point about the center of excellence and so forth is kind of like what's the end game of that to a degree, or what's the attraction of that, right? And I don't mean this. I guess it's like, what am I getting out of that necessarily? To a degree, right? I love the idea, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the point is that if you're selling that to somebody else, what are you selling them on? And maybe that needs to be better articulated in order to get the people who are interested but don't necessarily know what they're going to get out of it. And I think the comparison to crypto to the metaverse is somewhat of a different argument, if you will, because the upside to crypto is I'm going to be taking risk, but I'm going to get better value. I'm going to get money out of it, to make it plain, right? And that's an easier argument, and frankly a worse argument, because that's going to attract the speculators and so forth, because they can see that money is an easy thing to attract people to. Where I think in the metaverse, and to the point about the center of excellence, is it's much more about enrichment, socially, intellectually, spiritually, however you want to describe it. It isn't as binary as crypto, which is money, value, wealth, right? So I think that to a certain extent, that is unfortunately a harder sell to make, because those things aren't as necessarily tangible as crypto, for better or for worse. So that would kind of be, Eric, to your points, kind of my thoughts about what is that value add that you're offering. And again, I don't mean to be critical or negative, because I think it's a great thing, and you know me, Eric. I'm totally on board. I'm just saying, how do you articulate that?
Well, that's our challenge. We return to discussion so often just to find the better understanding. How do we say it? How do we understand it? I appreciate the nod. Like finding the real utilities for NFTs is very exciting. And of course, like easy, quick money in the way of speculative trading is zero sum. It's a zero sum thing, and that real value gets built in a steady increment, right? Real work gets done in a slow and steady increment. Improvements happen in the hardware and like the infrastructure and all of that. And that at a certain point, we achieve network state. At a certain point, we achieve a network exponent where the platform is like an entire utility. That it's the NFT utility aspect, like sort of encapsulating that real value. I don't know. It's
and to that point, Jason, sorry to interrupt, but to that point, real quick. I mean, if you read, Bill Gates' first book, The Road Ahead, right? He talks about the positive feedback loop, right? About how do PCs build utility for people, right? And how that positive feedback loop needs to be not a monetary return, if you will, not an ROI, right? That it needs to be much more emotional, if you will, right? And satisfactory, right? Is that you're not necessarily getting, and this goes back to the analogy of the crypto, right? Is that you're not getting money back, but you're getting satisfaction back. You're getting a quality of life improvement of being able to talk to people over the internet and having a PC on every desk, as he describes it, right? So, are we going down that path, which I think we are, with the metaverse? Because that, and I guess that's why I would question the comparison with crypto, because it seems to be much more intangible. In the same way that being able to get on AOL AIM, in '96, gave you some sort of intangible value or intangible interest, right? Not a monetary ROI interest, the way crypto does, or proposes to do. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I don't mean to monetize.
Can I jump in on that? I think that's one of the biggest things that people mistake. In an economy, we're not looking necessarily at an ROI. I mean, when we look at how currency is distributed, a government gives it out, and the only point of that government giving it out is to get it back, which creates the circular flow. So if we're just looking at investment and return, use fiat. That's not an economy. What we're doing when we look at this stuff, and I hope I'm not seeming like I'm disagreeing with you. I just want to add to the point. We need to look at what resources are being created, and when it comes to metaverse and crypto and everything, can we eat it? Can we drink it? Can we survive in it? Those are the real questions we need to ask.
So, Brian, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that maybe, I guess my point was that maybe the analogy to crypto isn't the right analogy, or isn't an analogy that is one-to-one. I think the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah, there are two parts to the triangle, really, because when you have assets and things that you want to trade as a unit of measurement, you got to use crypto, because Excel just doesn't cut it. That's it.
I have a comment that can help button this all up. Yeah, because we're a little bit over time. I can see Dr. Sharif is sort of sitting there like, let's find a conclusion, right? I think I have a remark that we can tie this together with, and it's just that there's a great equalizer. That platform and network is a great equalizer, and that using an analogy to the World Cup, football, right? The beautiful game, the sport that is life, is a great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're from a rich country or a poor country. Any country can put forward a pretty good club and compete, and that there's almost no advantage that wealth can purchase. There's almost no permanent advantage. It's proven out. Look at the disparity of wealth between nations, and then look at their competitiveness in the football match. And that the match is a great equalizer. And that is true in the intellectual domain as well. That's true in the research and development domain and in the innovative competitiveness. And that tomorrow is just another game. And that it's important to remember that nobody's driving the bus. It's just tomorrow's another game for the competition, for the attention, for the network preference, right? It's important to remember the one parallel here is that in crypto, everybody who has ever used it chose to. Nobody's ever been born into a circumstance where the default currency and economy is on a cryptocurrency, right? It's that is actively selected, opted into, and that what we need, like investigation-wise, is the adequacy of informed consent. To the extent that a participant has lost their informed consent and that they didn't know what they were walking into, for Rob's example, flips, I'm flying now. That could be, you could literally vomit inside the mask, and I mean, you don't want to do that. So should you sue them though? Should you sue them if they make you vomit? I don't know yet. There will be a lot of investigations, and tomorrow's just another game. But these platform and this information is a great equalizer, and yeah, the discussion is wonderful for us to just incrementally make that value and get that clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Donny. What's your concluding remarks? I think.
The investigation that I find the most meaningful and worthwhile in this whole metaverse, DAO, crypto space are the experiments, and it is the investigation of what people find is valuable and creating new values is incredible. So metaverse not being how to define a metaverse, these games that are attracting different communities are calling themselves a metaverse. I see a way of having those circular economies where we're finding values that we didn't believe we could find value before. This weekend, I was at some regenerative farms that are linked to metaverses, and being able to see that people value public goods and can reinvest into public goods to create the world we actually want to see. So, you know, the twinning of the metaverse and actually linking to the real world is happening. I've seen it, and it's interesting that communities can establish different ROIs and what's valuable to them in these circular economies, and that we can do some real good quicker than centralized organizations and governments to really make a difference to a lot of people. And like Jason said, it is voluntary, but it's interesting when we start listening and investigating what people really are interested in, that we have a way to iterate and make this reality quite quickly. So yeah, exciting times. Thanks.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, you want to add some point? I think you want to share your slides.
Well, Sharif, this is just what we were talking about. This is the map of the different themes in the current metaverse investigations and metaverse research. And it's just that, as we talked about before, you can see there's a lot of differences in there, but just to begin to see from the emerging themes, the basics, the niche and the motor themes, the interest areas, and the virtual worlds, the human rights, the internet, the e-learning, and computer instructions are and sustainability. When you do a heat map on these, those are clearly the largest areas where metaverse investigations are going. And this is just a chart of research that was published actually last week on the current investigations in the metaverse. And I find it very interesting as you look at them, because they're fairly consistent with what we've said today, with the exception of cryptocurrency, which I don't really see cryptocurrency on this one as an emerging an area of much research right now in the metaverse. But I just find this is a very interesting map, which supports a lot of what has been said today. And this is from a research study as of last week. So, Sharif, that's just some quick comments.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. You know that World Talent Economy from Mr. Extra, you want to add any point?
I just have a quick question, Eric. What does motor mean?
In the research area, that is the area of where current action is taking place in the industry.
Okay, thank you.
I was
Thank you,
unclear
everyone.
about that as well, but thank you for that. That's where the
Thank
dynamic
you.
is happening. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. You know that World Talent Economy Forum working in emerging economy for developing a knowledge-oriented society. Already we are working with 22,000 institutions. Most of the cases, the big corporation, big university, or big countries, they naturally touch this kind of community. We are engaging with them. We are solving many social and economical complex problems. So we need more of your support and collaboration. Those who want to join in our World Talent Economy Forum team in emerging economy, you can join. You know, we have our very interesting projects. We have our Nikola Tesla Technology Conference this December. We have another conference with Dhaka University. Beside that, we are solving housing problem. We are solving healthcare problem, energy problem. So those who really want to engage with this kind of projects, you can join with us and you can solve the social and economic problem of emerging economy. Thank you, Dr. Musa, Professor David Smith, Mr. Jason, Professor Rob, Mr. Eric, Duani Philippi, Mr. Extra, and Mr. Brian for joining today's sessions and your support for World Talent Economy Forum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye bye. Thank
Thank you,
you so
Dr.
much.
Sharif.
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Thank you to all the meeting speakers. Thank you.